course, the famed company slash investor that has invested in European tech since 1997, with companies like N26 and a strong track record in deep tech and infrastructure behind them. But the spotlight is on you, Erik. Could you just tell everyone what you're building, how you got started, and where you're at now?
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having us, Andreas. We are building a data engine that powers the future of clinical trial intelligence. The fundamental problem that we're solving is fragmented data that trial operators, biotechs and pharma companies need to handle on a daily basis. This comes from what I and several others in the founding team experienced for decades. Hundreds of spreadsheets from patient data that's coming in real time, which makes it really, really hard to understand what's happening to patients and how to run trials. And so bringing all this data together, empowering it with workflows and agents gives a unique opportunity to evaluate patients in real time and run much more efficient clinical trials.
I literally just spoke to Oliver from Basecamp Research. I'd love to ask you, there's a lot happening on that front of mapping the genome of the world and so on. Can you tell me how that overlaps with what you're doing?
Yeah, so we are really in the active part of clinical trials. You've done the hard part of figuring out which target molecule or therapy you want to test in humans, and all of a sudden you enter the world of clinical trials, where data is being collected from hospitals around the world, and operationally the volume of data and operations makes it really hard to handle. And what we've seen in the last 10 years is an explosion of data, not only in volume, but in complexity and fragmentation. When I was at Novartis 10 years ago, it was mostly on one database, clinical data. Today, we collect clinical data, lab, biomarkers. We ask patients to have wearables at home, to write diaries, and all that makes it really, really hard to understand pretty simple things, let alone really complex questions like genomics. And so there's a discordance. That's what I observed between how awesome, how far we've come with scientific progress, and yet where we are in terms of understanding data and leveraging it with the underlying infrastructure.
Yeah, I guess there's a bit of a data paralysis setup happening right now across so many different parts in the world and in industry as well. Christian, I'd love to ask you, what I'm seeing as a podcaster that's just doing tons of conversations like this, I'm seeing that there's people working on AI, on managing data across the stack of medicine. Can you talk a bit about why you thought that Rivia was the company to back now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And it's we are a research investor, and a research investor, what matters most is the team. So obviously this was what convinced us. So Erik and his partner Thiago, I think they have the experience, they have the background for building such a company. And the second thing is the traction, and traction never lies, So if you see traction, there's obviously a need for a product and a demand for a product, and these two basically they convinced us, and then. Yeah, the deeper we digged into this, the more we were convinced about that this is the right thing to do. Not just what they're doing today, but also with the potential to expand on this, based on this. And as data becomes more and more important, and as the ROI of the product is so superior, we think it has a great future and can also basically differentiate long time in that regard. And this is what we're always looking for. We're looking for something basically which is not ahead today, but which stays ahead. So kind of building a wall to defend, and this is obviously the data mode, which makes a lot, and the data mode integration into workflows, which makes it just very, very sticky and very good product, and realizing always a very good eye for customers.
Yeah. Erik, I'd love to ask you to understand the product a little better. Are you building? So you've got thousands of patient data across thousands of files. That's super difficult to unify at this current time. That's what you're doing. The question that I have for you is then, what's the interface for the user on the other side? Is that a database that you then have AI that you can prompt and ask, or how does this work? What are you truly delivering to the customer, so to say?
Yeah, there's really three structural components that you can think of, and the end user of our tool, to anchor it from that point, are people inside biotech and pharmaceutical companies, specifically operational medical functions. These three layers are first comprised of a intelligence layer that not only unifies all these fragmented data sources, but structures them and applies specific clinical trial logic. You have to remember each trial is unique. In fact, each patient is unique. And so you have to be able to model this data to match the specificities of each trial in order to then point that to workflows, which is our second layer, operational workflows, medical workflows that feed into agents. And so we have a vertical sequence that enables to go through each of these stepwise processes and to enable the teams to gain tremendous speed and efficiency in these various activities.
Erik, can you talk a bit about the real world examples of how this has enabled drug developer to move much faster through trials?
Absolutely. So in a clinical trial, because it's a scientific experiment, you have very set schedules of when patients are coming into the hospital, so-called visits. And so you need to make sure that patients are coming in on time and track that they're doing this. Historically, that's done in a bunch of Excel trackers, and you update things ongoingly. In Rivia, these visit schedules have been configured to match the specificities of the trial because there's loads of conditions. For example, if you have a threatening side effect, you pause, you wait some time to match the logic of this trial. And only then can you evolve from a reactive behavior to a proactive oversight, because you're able to identify issues before they actually happen. For example, you see a patient that is at risk of missing one of the visits. So you need to call the hospital and say, please make sure the patient comes in within this time window, otherwise they're no longer eligible. One patient on average in a clinical trial costs $150,000. So you can imagine that just something rather trivial like this, a phone call, can have a direct cost saving for the trial.
That's incredible. Christian, I want to ask you to go a bit meta on this segment of venture investing, because it feels to me like there's a lot of, let's call it generalist or wider deep tech funds that are now doing a lot in life science or in this space that's intersection between data and software and life science. Can you talk a bit about what you're seeing, how you're thinking about the category? Would you want to touch as an investor? Would you don't want to touch an investor? What makes you scared? What makes you excited?
Yeah, well, obviously scared. What makes us scared to start with that is that we see kind of FOMO and craziness in the market again. We latest have seen this in 21, where valuations have gone through the roof. Now we have a kind of bifurcation in the market where we see the same kind of craziness with valuations really going through the roof, and others not getting the money, although they have a great business model and they were looked like a good progress. Just SaaS companies, growing 3-4x, doing 10 million revenues, they have a hard time to find funding. So nowadays, so that's kind of this bifurcation where we see that makes us, it's a craziness in the market again. We try to, since we have been active in deep tech and also machine learning, AI since quite some time, and not since ChatGPT was launched. We feel very, very good in that, and also with our team basically covering certain sectors of deep tech, we feel, I think, we have a very good setup to make proper decisions here, and also basically to find our way through the AI stack. And if we look at AI, it's kind of we even organized our team according to the AI stack, because if you look into what we have been investing before, be it fintech or be it enterprise typical SaaS models, or be it in deep tech, food tech, for instance. The innovation comes through AI, basically, even in food tech, where you think we don't look at new proteins anymore. We look how basically AI can help develop proteins, or how can AI shrink lab time. So this is the kind of thinking. And along this thinking, we have organized a team according to, we call it the infrastructure layer, then the foundation model layer, then the basically DevOps, the tools layer, and the application layer. And most noisy is the application layer, obviously. And because many of these, everything comes in, everything we get today now has an AI wrapper somehow, even in the name, or basically something built around. And now to distinguish, okay, what is just a wrapper, or what can we really become a solid business model and business which can defend itself even a couple of years from now. I think that's the hard thing to do, specifically on the application layer, where basically have everything has an AI in the name today. So that's and this is, but we organized according to that, try to find our way. And what makes it if you stay on the application layer, what makes it why is it attractive? It's attractive if it's basically dealing with proprietary data with which they can train and learn and basically get better, make the product better over time. I think this is something, and how it's going to be integrated into the workflows and has a real ROI from the first day on. I think that really matters, and this exactly applies on Rivia here, where we see exactly the defendable mode long term. And this is also a little bit describing how we think about, and this again applies to Rivia, but also to other on this application layer.
Erik, I'd love to ask you a couple of founder-specific questions, a bit about your journey. So maybe you could just let everyone know your background, and then I'd love to hear from you. What's been the biggest surprise in being a founder, and what's the thing that you've had to adjust to the most?
Sure. So I initially trained as a chemist, but quickly found that I enjoy human contact, human relationships too much to stay in the lab, and so ended up in the world of drug safety at Novartis, and that was my starting point to what I've done the last 10 years, mostly as a data scientist and analyst working on data and clinical development. And I think the initial realization there was this disparity. I was working at one of the leading global pharmaceutical companies in the world, yet people were surrounded by boxes of paper back then. These were boxes of paper containing side effects. And I thought, this is crazy. We could do so much better. We can help bring these tremendous therapies or help assess them in a much more efficient way. And I observed that consistently at global leading pharmaceuticals, at the service providers, IQVIA, and also at small emerging biotechs, which today are largely the innovation powerhouses of our industry. And so these small biotechs who rarely have in-house data scientists or in-house resources, but also the ones who are most under pressure to deliver, have an acute need, and I really saw that as opportunity. And the other thing is, I saw two typologies of people that I really wanted to bring together that I thought were critical for building a business like Rivia. On one hand, people who have deep expertise in clinical development, which is why we have 2 senior executive physicians, 2 chief medical officers who brought several drugs to market, and pair that with top talent engineering. That combination in our industry is actually quite rare. You typically have one or the other, but not both. And for me, that was really important to really make sure we're building the right things with the best possible engineering. Now, to your second question on being a founder and what's been surprising, my role, I feel like gets redefined. What I need to do gets redefined every 6 to 9 months, and that's a continuous learning journey. It's questioning oneself: how can I be most useful for the company at this point in time as the company's changing? 3 years ago, I was doing everything from fundraising to buying coffee. Now I don't buy the coffee anymore. I still need to fundraise. So that's a tremendous journey to be on. It's a great, fantastic opportunity.
I think we should touch a bit on leadership, Erik. But Christian, I would love to ask you, in general, when you've seen tons of founder stories and founder developments over time, what would you say to the audience about founder growth and how a founder should prepare for the journey of being an early stage founder?
Yeah, well, prepare is obviously it's a good thing. You have to make the experience, in terms of you having done this. It's obviously in terms of or how can you improve basically or grow faster. I think the best way is to basically to be very open, to be receptive to feedback, to basically to talk to other founders who have been successful and who are willing to share their journey. Have a good basically setup of advisors in terms of your investors, maybe others. Basically, that's I think something where you need to be always adjust a little bit on your journey. I think that's the best way to grow, and I think being open to advice. I know that many founders know exactly their way, and some it's not so easy to to coach or do something, but support. But I think this openness of adapting, which also Erik mentioned in terms of you really have to open, because especially in the industry we are in, things are happening so fast as we see. Open cloud came up and it changes everything. So, and tomorrow something else comes up and will change everything. So that's why I think you have to be open to that, specifically if you are into this agentic world and rely on AI and how quickly AI develops. And that means you have to be agile. You have to also organize your team to be very agile and react fast on things which are happening, and surround yourself with the best. Hire people which are better than you. So that's, I think, a key thing. Obviously, and this you need to experience, need to learn, and so on. So you have to often give up and share. And also be able to delegate things, and that's I think just a few ways of finding your way through this entrepreneurial journey.
Erik, what has been your core tips? The thing you'd say to all the founders out there that are trying to adapt to the growth of their company, because it's not always simple to grow as fast as a company that's taking off. How are you doing it?
I think two things come to mind in particular. One reflects what Christian said. Stay really open-minded to what the company and the business needs from you, and think deeply about what support you need at that point in time. I think bringing in the right people at the right time can have a massive leverage. And so that can be, of course, a talent that you hire full-time, but sometimes advisory or external support can also be a great way to leverage people's experience you might not have yet. And so having that, let's say, that sobriety and that clear-mindedness around how you can leverage your network and others around you, and question continuously what you need to be focusing on, I think can give you a lot of headwind.
Erik, before we close, I want to ask you just to look a bit into the coming decade, so to say, or maybe just the next 5 years. It's hard to go 10 years out now. What will happen to the clinical trial landscape as something like you will be adopted by the market?
Right. I think there's a few things that come to mind, both in how people are navigating through trials from a, let's say, near behavioral perspective to the fundamental orchestration and conduct of trials. What we are trying to enable is really this shift from very reactive behavior, because you're unable to manage volume, to very proactive. That allows you to catch issues earlier, to make better decisions, which has a real impact on the outcome of the trial. More structurally, we are redefining how clinical trial teams look at what they need to operate a single trial. We're trying to multiply the capacity of teams, and so this requires biotechs to completely rethink how they work inside their own organizations, how they work with service providers like clinical research organizations, in order to have much leaner teams to operate the equivalent of today's trials. What that allows fundamentally is that we have more opportunity to evaluate drugs in a broader range of trials. We have higher success rates, we have more speed, and ultimately we bring drugs to market more successfully with less capital. And maybe I'll just end on this last point. In the end, we've seen the industry shift over the last 10 years to the biotech industry to a heavy M&A model. You look at how drugs are brought to market today, it's largely biotechs innovating and then large pharma acquiring and bringing those drugs to market. And so we have to think through that model and say, how can we make that more successful? Because we've seen a reduction in the success rates. And I think this requires a structural shift, not only from a data infrastructure perspective, but from a change management perspective of how teams are operating, how they're leveraging data to bring those success rates up.
Incredibly exciting. Final note, I want to ask you, you're obviously growing your team in Zurich. What kind of profiles are you looking for specifically? Who should be reaching out? I'm sure we have a bunch tuning in today that are saying, might this be the place for me?
Right. So we are looking for people across our three pillars, primarily at this stage heavy on the product side, which is both full stack engineering and AI engineering to help us build out our agents. On the go-to-market side, if you are, have experience in direct full cycle sales, and also in customer engagement. We spend a lot of time with our customers, and so people who really want to deliver and measure the impact from our customers and customer engagement are also very welcome to get in touch with us.
Amazing. Cool. Christian, Erik, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'm sure that there's a ton that have tuned in today that will be excited to join you, Erik. Thank you, both of you.